During movie night at our place, I stepped out to get popcorn. When I came back, I noticed his phone unlocked. Messages kept popping up from someone saved as work. I opened the chat and saw pictures of them together in bed. When I confronted him, he said, "I needed a break from your drama." She was just peaceful. We were 4 months away from our 5-year anniversary. I had started looking at wedding venues, even though we weren't officially engaged yet. I was just hopeful. Josh always said he needed more time, and I believed him. We were living together, we split rent, we had a dog named Milo. That was enough proof to me that we were building something real. Something permanent. That Friday night, I decided we'd have a cozy little movie night. No phones, no emails, just the two of us, wrapped in blankets with popcorn and chocolate. It had been a hard week at work for both of us, and I wanted to bring some lightness back into our space. Josh had been distant lately, but I chalked it up to stress. We'd been arguing here and there, mostly about him working too late or canceling plans last minute. But I thought we were okay. I really did. I picked a stupid rom-com, one of those feel-good ones that doesn't require too much thinking. Josh wasn't thrilled with the choice, but he smiled and said, "Fine, but next time it's my pick." I laughed, kissed his cheek, and went to the kitchen to microwave the popcorn. It took longer than usual because I decided to be fancy and drizzle it with caramel. I don't know why, maybe I was trying too hard. I just wanted him to see I still cared. When I walked back into the living room, he was sitting there, eyes on the screen, blanket draped over his lap. But something else caught my eye. His phone was on the coffee table, screen glowing. I wouldn't have even glanced at it if it weren't for the way the message preview lit up the room. It said, "Last night was perfect. Still thinking about you." And the contact name? Work. At first, I thought maybe it was a client. He worked in advertising. Late night events, early morning calls. It wasn't unusual. But the pit in my stomach told me this wasn't just a client being overly friendly. I sat down beside him and pretended to be interested in the movie. He laughed at a scene, and I fake laughed with him. Meanwhile, the phone buzzed again. Another message. This time I could see part of a picture. A shoulder, a pillow, skin. I didn't even think. I reached over, grabbed the phone, and opened the thread. There were photos. Of her, of him, of them together in bed, smiling. One of them eating breakfast in what looked like my robe. The captions? Things like, "You make me feel alive and can't wait to see you again tomorrow." I didn't even realize I was holding my breath. My hands were trembling, my vision blurred. I shoved the phone toward him, and he didn't even flinch. Just paused the movie and looked at me like I'd dropped a glass of water instead of a bomb. "I needed a break from your drama," he said like I was the issue. She was just peaceful. I stared at him. Peaceful? I was chaos? I gave him 5 years, held him through depression, helped him get his first job, stood by him when his dad was sick. And now I was being traded in like some expired bottle of milk because I wasn't peaceful? I couldn't even cry. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out every last piece of me and left a shell behind. I stood up and walked to the bedroom, locked the door behind me, and for the first time in years, I didn't care if he followed. He didn't. And that silence spoke louder than anything else. But the story didn't end there. Because a week later, I found out who work really was. And that changed everything. I spent the next few days crashing at my best friend Leila's apartment. I didn't say much. Just told her we had a fight and I needed space. I wasn't ready to spill everything yet. Part of me still felt ashamed. Like I had missed something so obvious, or worse, like I had caused it. I kept thinking about his words. "I needed a break from your drama," as if I were some kind of emotional burden he had to escape from. But the truth started creeping in, piece by piece. Like how he always kept his phone face down, or the business trips that conveniently overlapped with times I was busy with work, the canceled date nights, the late night showers. I could see it all now. It was like the curtain had finally been pulled back and I was staring at a completely different person. A few days later, I got curious. Not about him, about her. I couldn't stop thinking about who this work woman was. She had been in my home, worn my clothes, slept in my bed. I needed a name, a face, something. I logged into his iPad. It was still connected to our shared cloud. He never bothered to log out. And that's where I found her name, Vanessa Harper. My stomach dropped, because that name? It wasn't new to me. Vanessa worked at the same company I did, different department, but we'd cross paths in the break room. I remembered her. Tall, polished, soft-spoken. The kind of woman who gave off perfect energy without even trying. She once complimented my shoes, and I thought she was sweet. Now all I could picture was her in them, under my sheets. I felt sick, but it didn't end there. The worst part? I looked at the timestamps on some of the photos, and one of them was taken the night Josh told me he was working late at the office. The same night I had stayed up till 2 and waiting for him, worried he might have gotten into an accident. No, this wasn't just cheating. This was betrayal on a surgical level. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even throw my phone against the wall like I wanted to. Instead, I started planning. I went back to our apartment the next morning while I knew he'd be at work. Packed only what was mine. Left everything he'd ever gifted me, including the necklace I once thought was a promise, on the counter with a note that just said, "Thank you for the peace." But that wasn't the end. Because just when I thought I was out of his story, he pulled me right back in. 3 days later, I got a message from Vanessa. Not an email, not a DM, a voicemail. Her voice was shaking. She said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know about you. I thought I was the only one." She wasn't angry. She wasn't mean. She sounded broken, confused, and desperate. And that's when it hit me. He was playing both of us. Hearing Vanessa's voice cracked something open in me. I expected her to gloat, maybe defend him, maybe even laugh at me for being the other woman. But instead, she sounded like someone who just realized she'd been living inside a lie. Just like I had, her message was short, but one line stood out like a knife. "He told me you were just a crazy ex who wouldn't move out." I had to sit down. So all this time, while I was cooking dinner, folding our laundry, and talking about baby names, he was telling someone else that I was some unhinged woman who refused to leave his life. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. But I did know one thing: I wasn't going to let him walk away untouched. Not anymore. I called Vanessa. At first, she didn't pick up, but later that night, my phone rang. We talked for over 2 hours. I told her everything: the 5 years, the dog, the apartment lease, the countless times I helped him when he was broke or spiraling. And she told me her side, how they had been seeing each other for nearly a year, how he claimed I was emotionally abusive, how he'd begged her to be patient while he sorted things out. He wasn't just cheating. He had created 2 parallel realities, 2 versions of himself, and 2 versions of us. And here's where the next twist came. Vanessa wasn't just upset, she was furious. Not at me, at him. She had just learned, through me, that she had wasted a year of her life being the peaceful escape from a woman who never actually caused the storms he blamed her for. Then she said something that changed the whole game. "He's planning to propose to me. This weekend. In Asheville." My heart stopped. That town meant something to me. It was where Josh and I had taken our first trip together. We had hiked, gotten lost, ended up at a random cabin where he first said, "I love you." I had told him it was the place I'd want to be proposed to someday. Now he was taking her there. That was my last straw. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. Vanessa and I came up with a plan. It wasn't petty, okay, maybe a little. But it was honest. And it would force him to confront everything. No more hiding. No more stories. Just the truth, stripped, raw, and ugly in front of both the women he had lied to. So we drove. Separately. And we showed up in Asheville. And when we knocked on the door of the Airbnb he rented, he opened it, smiling, holding a ring box behind his back, wearing my favorite sweater. The one I bought for him on our 3rd Christmas together. And his face? Dropped. For a second, none of us spoke. It was like time hit pause just to let that moment breathe. Josh stood there with that stupid stunned look on his face, like we'd all shown up to a surprise party he didn't know he planned. Behind him, the place looked exactly how I feared it would: candles, wine glasses, rose petals on the floor. It was everything I had once imagined. Only now it felt like a mockery. Vanessa stepped in first. I followed, saying nothing, just staring. His mouth opened, then shut again. He looked between us like he couldn't quite decide who to light at first. Finally, he muttered, "What is this?" I wanted to laugh. Instead, I walked over to the fireplace mantel, picked up the little Polaroid he had framed of him and Vanessa, taken just a week ago, and said, "This is the end of your little show." Vanessa added, "Or should we say, your audition for Best Leading Man in a Fantasy Romance?" And then we laid it all out. Every lie, every overlap, every text and timestamp. He started off defensive, classic Josh, claiming we were both twisting things, accusing us of being dramatic, saying we ambushed him. But the more we talked, the more trapped he became. Like a spider realizing its own web was starting to close in. Then came the next twist, the one even I didn't see coming. Vanessa pulled out her phone and said, "Should I play it?" I looked at her, confused. She tapped her screen. And there it was, a recording, one from 3 days ago when Josh had gone to her apartment to explain things. He didn't know she was recording. But the whole thing was there. His voice, clear as day, saying, "I can't leave her yet. She pays half the bills, and I still owe her money. You're fun, but I can't afford to lose what I have with her." So it was never love. Not with me. Not with her. It was about convenience. Survival. Control. He was using both of us for what he could get. Security from me, comfort from her. The tears finally came, not from heartbreak, but from rage. I felt like a fool. Like 5 years of my life had been tossed into a shredder, and he didn't even have the decency to pretend it meant something. But the story wasn't done unraveling yet. Because when I left the Airbnb, shaking, furious, ready to block him from every corner of my life, he ran after me. And then he dropped another bomb. "Wait, there's something else. I never told you everything about Vanessa." I froze. Behind me, Vanessa shouted, "What is he talking about?" And I turned around, face burning, heart racing, just in time to hear him say, "She wasn't the only one." For a second, all I could hear was the wind through the trees and the pounding of my heart in my ears. Vanessa stood frozen, eyes wide, the soft curls in her hair trembling like they too were stunned by what he just said. She wasn't the only one. The silence stretched so long it started to suffocate us. Josh had the nerve to look sorry, that pathetic, puppy-eyed look he'd used on me too many times before. But this time, it didn't land. Not on me. Not on Vanessa. I asked him, "How many?" He looked down at the ground, shuffled his feet, and muttered, "3. Maybe 4. Vanessa took a step back like the words had hit her physically. I didn't flinch. Maybe because a part of me had already known. Maybe because some sick part of me had expected exactly this. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a serial manipulator. A man who collected women like backup plans. And then came the next twist, one that neither of us could have predicted. Vanessa looked at me, her voice eerily calm. Did he ever mention Olivia? That name hit me like a slap. Because Olivia was my old roommate. We lived together for 2 years before Josh and I moved in. I'd introduced them at a barbecue. She was sweet, a little shy, the kind of person you'd never think twice about, which, in hindsight, made her the perfect person to hide in plain sight. Vanessa went on. She's one of the others. She told me 2 weeks ago, said she'd kept quiet because she thought you knew. Everything started spinning. I remembered the nights Olivia would disappear without telling me where she was going. The time she borrowed my dress and said it was for a date. The inside jokes she and Josh had that never quite made sense. The late-night texts I assumed were nothing. I felt like the ground was dissolving beneath me. But Vanessa wasn't done. She pulled up her messages and showed me screenshots. Olivia had confessed everything, how she and Josh had started sleeping together while I was out of town on a work trip, how he told her I had cheated first and he was just seeking comfort. That's when something inside me snapped, not just heartbreak, not just anger. It was clarity. Cold, clean, brutal clarity. I had built my life around a man whose version of love was built on lies, manipulation, and emotional theft. He didn't just break hearts. He rewrote reality to keep himself safe in every version of the story. I walked back up to the porch, calm as ever, and took the ring box from the table. I opened it. Simple solitaire. nothing like what I'd once dreamed of. I tossed it in the fire pit. Vanessa followed my lead. She took off the bracelet he had given her, one I recognized because it was the same one he once gifted me, but in a different color. She threw it in too. We didn't scream. We didn't cry. We let the fire do the talking. And Josh? He just stood there, arms at his sides, the flames reflecting in his wide, empty eyes. Before I left, I turned back one last time and said, "You said she was peaceful. You said I was drama. But the only chaos in this story was you." That night, Vanessa and I drove back in separate cars. But before I left, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "He broke us, but he also freed us." And in some twisted way, it was true. Because sometimes the most painful endings are just brutal beginnings in disguise. And I had never felt more free. Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who wear the best masks. But the truth always finds its way to the surface, and when it does, it doesn't just break you, it builds you. Never settle for someone who calls your love drama just because they can't handle accountability. You deserve honesty, not convenience. If this story shook you, made you feel seen, or reminded you of your worth, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this. Your support helps us keep sharing the truth, one twist at a time.